Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Scruffy Movies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace.
And I'm John Crocker.
And today we have the epic conclusion of the podcast we thought was only going to take one episode last week when we started to break down the Phase 4 movies and TV shows. And then turns out we only got about halfway through, and that's when we started to hurry because we noticed that we weren't going to be able to even get through half of it. So today we'll be covering the next half of MCU Phase 4, which is Loki, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, What If, Hawkeye, and Thor, Love and Thunder.
My favorite half.
Yes.
Is Loki before Doctor Strange or after?
And Loki is before.
All right, so we should start with that one.
Yep, let's go. Let's do it. So as soon as Loki grabbed the Tesseract in Endgame and then just poofed away, I was like, oh, he poofed right into his Disney Plus series. And then I was correct. That's exactly what was happening.
So they have confirmed that because I know that's what most of us thought as soon as it happened, but they have actually come out and officially stated that little slice of time right there is what sets him off on his own timeline to do shenanigans in the Loki show.
Mm-hmm. And I did see a little bit more of like a plot synopsis of it today, and well, not really a plot synopsis, but like details about it. And basically Loki is just willingly wreaking havoc on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but he's not affecting the timeline that we're watching currently because, as they explained in Endgame, whatever happens in the past doesn't affect the future because he's basically creating his own timelines. It's not affecting the present timeline. So whatever he's doing is just like in alternate timelines, and he's just affecting history, I guess, for fun.
So that's cool. So I wonder how much we'll actually see of events that we already know, do take place and the outcomes of them. Like, I wonder if they'll lean into that or if it'll kind of just spin off and be its own show that is related and in the universe, but not really.
Yeah, I'm curious how much it's going to actually connect because I mean, like, so far they've only just announced Loki, and like he might pop up and we see Chris Hemsworth there or whoever, but it's not going to be connected to the main MCU. And always, it seems, Suicide Squad had this problem as well. When you have who's basically equates to a bad guy as your main character, you have to find somebody worse for them to fight. And I don't know who Loki's going to end up fighting in this show, if they're even going to go that route, if they're going to have like a villain and like an overarching story that Loki's trying to do as the season goes on.
Yeah, and I wonder if this means that we won't see much of Loki in the movies moving forward. Because I sort of look at it, with the shows, is that sort of like offloading them from the movie universe into still the same universe, but not as much spotlight on them. So I wonder if this is sort of sunsetting Loki as well, if he'll be back in Love and Thunder or the future.
I mean, I don't really want him to come back really because he kind of had his say and like completed his character arc in Infinity War, and now that they've brought him back and he's almost, he got to a point of a character that we've seen so far, but he hadn't like completed his character arc yet. I feel like Loki in Infinity War looking at Thor and saying, my name is Loki, Odin's son, and like acknowledging that he is of Asgard and he's Thor's brother and all this stuff, and then basically sacrificing his life to save Thor, I feel like is the complete character arc from the person that we were introduced to in the first Thor movie. So this Loki is like, I feel going to go on his own journey, do his own thing, and I wouldn't really want him to pop up in like the Thor movies or anything anymore, because this is a guy who he's had his time in those movies, but now this version of this character is doing his own thing, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, so no surprise. Guess who's back?
I know, yeah, and they might do that. You never know. I'm hoping more, though, it ends up being like that we see Thor in the Loki show and not Loki back in the Thor movies.
Yeah, I'm with you there. This one seems to be the only one so far. Well, I guess other than Doctor Strange, where they're really, really doubling down on the multiverse dealio and sort of using that as not just as a ploy in the show to help describe things or move things forward, but actually as sort of like the basis of the show. I mean, if it weren't for that, then, we couldn't have alternate reality Loki.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally just him going back in time and creating like alternate universes, more or less. And I don't know if the history that he is disrupting is going to be kept to the MCU history. Like he'll only go back to the 60s to mess with Howard Stark or Peggy Carter or something like that. Or if it's just like, oh no, Loki's going back to the American Revolution to just cause havoc because he thinks that'll be fun. Which honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing a show like that.
Yeah, just Loki, just trotting through history. That would be awesome.
Like Loki's just sitting there one day and he's like, I wonder what would happen if Abraham Lincoln wasn't shot. And then just goes back and stops it, like, just to see. Basically, living up to his name, which we've never really got to see, other than a few, like, glamour tricks, more or less. He's the god of mischief, but that part has never really been, like, explored or called upon very much. He can do, like, some cool tricks and stuff, like when Thor thinks in the first Avengers movie that he's in the cell, but then when Thor jumps in, it was a glamour and Loki wasn't really in the cell. But if this show is literally all just about like Loki saying, well, I am the god of mischief, let me try and live up to that, I'm here for it.
Yeah, I dig it. The trickster.
Yeah, and whenever they announced this show, I was like, oh man, I was like, come on, they killed him in Infinity War. This is getting to be ridiculous. Like, just let him be dead. But the way they did it, I'm okay with. It doesn't feel cheap to me, which I had mentioned in some podcast. I'm sure we were talking about Infinity War, where I said I didn't want them to bring Loki and Gamora back and have it feel cheap, but I felt like they were going to bring both of them back. But if they did, it would make their deaths meaningless. But that's not entirely true now, because the versions of the characters that we got back weren't the same people that we got. It wasn't just like, oh, and they're resurrected by the power of the Soul Stone. It was because they were doing like time travel things and messing stuff up that we got twisted versions of these characters, and they are not the same characters that we know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. I also allow it as an out, because it is two different characters, two different timelines, even though it's probably going to get very confusing for a lot of more casual fans.
Yeah, that's what I was saying with Endgame. Now's the time, and especially with these Disney Plus shows and everything, now's the time we get to finally make who's real fans and who's not. Who's just casual fans who are in it because society thinks it's cool, and who are people who actually like it. Because I remember talking to one of my wife's friends in college once. I won't say her name because I don't want to out her, but she was like, literally every chance she got, she was like, oh my God, I love Iron Man. Iron Man's the best. Iron Man's so cool. Iron Man is the coolest. I would die for Iron Man. I love him. And then I was like, oh, I think Age of Ultron was coming out soon. And I was like, oh, are you going to see Age of Ultron? And she was like, no, what's that? And I was like, it's the second Avengers movie. And she was like, is Iron Man going to be in it? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, what other movies do I need to see before I go see that one? And I was like, well, which ones have you seen? And she was like, well, I've seen Iron Man 1 and about half of Iron Man 3. And I was like, okay, I don't want to talk to you anymore then.
That's someone who loves the idea of Iron Man.
That's somebody who likes it because society said, hey, you know what's cool? Iron Man. And they developed some kind of personality where whenever they walked in a room, people were like, oh, she loves Iron Man. And they just liked that, so they kept it alive.
Well, yeah. Well, I think a lot of that plays into Disney's decision to do these shows as well. I mean, Black Widow and Loki. Well, Black Widow is an entire movie, but they're not so great at letting people die and then keeping them dead.
No, and I mean, really, like, I think literally everybody who's died has come back, and so even Coulson, who was like dead, the fans were just like, no, he's not. And Kevin Feige was like, no, he is. And they're like, yeah, sure. And they're like winking. And he's like, no, I don't know why you're winking. He's dead. We killed him. And they're like, okay, buddy. And just start winking some more. And he's like, no, you know what? Fine. He has his own TV show now. And everybody's like, yeah, we knew it.
Yep, that's pretty much it.
They just keep bringing everybody back. Everybody who you think's dead, not dead. Doesn't matter. They're brought back. Except for now, and we'll see. Black Widow is dead in the present timeline, so I don't know how they're going to end up spanning her, I would assume, trilogy of movies if this first one does good. I don't know how they're going to end up doing that, if they're going to continue going back in time, or there was a more like very structured like 3-arc story that happened in between Civil War and when we saw her again in Infinity War, or there's going to keep going back in time, or what. But I mean, time will tell whether or not Iron Man is gone forever. I don't think so, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's the one that they're just saving. They were saving it until they need it, or they already have like the zinger planned for, the beginning of phase 5 or something.
Right. And I think that it'll be a while before we see him again, but I don't think that the Iron Man character is gone for good. We'll see.
Well, do you think any of the multiverse tricks that Loki's doing will roll into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness?
I don't know. See, that would be really interesting because we've never really explored the multiverse, and it was actually something I was thinking about just as we were talking about Loki. What if the multiverse only legitimately becomes a reality because of what the Avengers did in Endgame, and they created all these alternate universes? Like, there was only one universe until people started time traveling, and then all of a sudden they started changing events, and basically those events just like butterfly effect, and it spirals out of one, spirals until eventually there's an infinite number of multiverses because of the choices the Avengers made in Endgame. That would be super interesting.
Yeah, it would. I think that would limit them a little bit, though, because if that becomes the genesis of all the multiverse realities, then they're never able to go backwards, which might make it hard to say, like, oh, well, there was a multiverse over here or there was a timeline over here where we had mutants the entire time. Like, I feel like they would want to keep that more in their back pocket.
Well, see, and that's something, I mean, they could totally do that. Like, who's to say, like, they go back, Captain America and Iron Man go back to the 60s to the SHIELD facility. They steal the Tesseract, and it's assumed that Captain America brings it and drops it right back off. What if, as he's dropping the Tesseract off back in that timeline, somebody sees him disappear, and they're like, oh, what's that? And they go and start messing around with the Tesseract, and then that's what causes the mutant gene to wake up in everybody, and then that creates that timeline, Like, there's infinite possibilities for what they could do to create those timelines.
Yeah, I just feel like they're snickering themselves a little bit if they really bring it down to the this is the moment that all of them are birthed from. I don't know. That's a little too heavy for me. But I like where you're going with it. But I do think it would limit their capabilities a little bit, because then we could really only use what we've seen in the past and all of that. I don't know. But then again, who knows? I mean, Loki could do anything, because see, they could take us back to see things we've never seen before. I guess I would be willing to go along with that. And especially with all of these tertiary sort of bits and pieces now with Loki and everything else, there's no telling what can actually just be justified in one episode of his show, and then you get an entire movie plot based off of it,
Exactly. And that could be because he saved Abraham Lincoln from being shot.
Could be.
I don't know how they'd spin it, but it could happen.
And if they do it, then we have to believe it. have to go with it. Well, let's roll this over into Doctor Strange then. This is probably my favorite one. This is, or not favorite, obviously, I don't know out of these which is going to be my favorite, but the one I'm looking the most forward to, other than potentially Thor. I think it's a toss-up between Doctor Strange and Thor.
Yeah, I once described my excitement for upcoming Marvel movie stuff as like, do you know the visual representation of listening to music where sometimes like the bass is a little bit higher than the guitar, or sometimes like the guitar is a little bit higher than the drums? Basically, like it's a never-ending ebb and flow of like the volume and the music moving up and down. I was like, my excitement is like that. It's always high, but it ebbs and flows depending on what we see or what we get, you know? Like, It's just backwards and forwards. I don't know what I'm going to end up liking more, what I'm going to end up liking less, but I can say that I am extremely excited for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, because I love that they're exploring the multiverse. And we talked about this a little bit last time. I love that they just have already announced, like, it's straight up, like, it's going to be a horror movie.
I think that was smart on their part, is to like go ahead and get that out now, like way ahead of time. And that way, when it does come out, if there are any like grumbles from the parents that think all Disney movies should be rainbows and sunshine, you know, then, or anybody else that might have any sort of thing to say about it, that, you know, negatively because of the fact that it's a horror, at least they'll be able to do the whole, well, we told you when we announced it like a long time ago that this is the way it was going to be. So you know, you had ample warning.
Yeah, I mean, those would be the same parents that took their kids to see Deadpool and then were like, oh my God, he's cursing in this. And everyone's like, yeah, literally every piece of the marketing campaign has warned you about this. Why did you bring this kid?
Well, yeah, but Deadpool is rated, like, they're always rated R, right? They've been rated
so
R.
far, yeah, Deadpool 1 and 2 are both rated R.
Yeah, so if you bring a kid to see that, then that's, you get what you get. But most of the other Avengers movies or Marvel movies, MCU movies, are definitely not rated R.
Yeah, they are PG-13. And there was even a point which I laughed a lot at. I was rewatching the San Diego Comic-Con panel where they were announcing everything, and they said Doctor Strange is going to be R-rated, and somebody, or not R-rated, a horror movie, and somebody shouted from the crowd, "Is it going to be rated R?" And Kevin Feige went to like keep talking, and then he heard that and he stopped and he was like, "No, it's going to be PG-13 and you'll like it."
I have not seen that clip, but that sounds hilarious. I could see him just saying that. Like I could picture it.
Yeah, it's going to be PG-13 and you'll like it, which is fine with me, because honestly, if you know how to make a horror movie, which Scott Derrickson, who's making this movie, I think knows how to do, your movies don't have to be rated R. They don't have to be like bloody or gory or say curse words or have nudity to be scary. Right. They can, I mean, like you can, like the Insidious movies. The first Insidious movie scared the crap out of me when I watched it in a theater. I would be like praying for daytime to come in the movie just so I know that it would be less of like monsters and stuff there. Like I could have a little bit of a break, and that was PG-13.
Yeah. You know, the one cool thing about all of these movies in general, and I think it was someone actually at what was it, Comic-Con, where they did the big announcement and everything. I believe it was someone on stage there that sort of said MCU movies can be unique because they're not like just a comedy or just a love story or just a suspense action movie or anything like that. They're a little bit of everything, and they're all a little bit of everything, and they all play off of one another, which is really kind of an old school tactic when it comes to movies and versus, you know, very linear, narrow movies that we tend to get a lot today. So I'm glad to see that. I say with Doctor Strange, it'll be a little bit of everything. If you expect not to laugh, you're crazy, because it's an MCU movie and there's going to be jokes. If, you know, you expect that there's not going to probably be at least a little romance somewhere along the way, you're probably going to, you know, you're wrong about that too, more than likely. So I think that they're just going to lean really heavy into the horror side of things. But at the end of the day, it'll still look and feel and act just like every other MCU movie. And it'll probably be a smorgasbord like they all are.
Yeah, but I'm excited that they're focusing more on the horror element because, like, you could technically say that and we talked about this a little bit last time too. Now they're starting to explore like different genres within the MCU. So Ant-Man and the Wasp feels like an MCU movie, but it's a heist movie. Like Ant-Man feels like an MCU movie, but it's ultimately a heist movie. And then same for like Spider-Man is an MCU movie, but it's ultimately like a teen drama. You know what I mean? Like they're exploring more of like the subsets of stuff. Thor Ragnarok is an MCU movie, but it's also like a giant brash buddy comedy.
Totally.
And so Doctor Strange will be an MCU movie, but also just a horror movie as well.
God, I'm excited, dude. And we did talk about this last week too, but they're rolling a lot of what WandaVision, what's going on in that show into it.
Right.
And that's, I can't remember if I said this last time. I do have thoughts about that, like whether or not, if they are tied that closely together, we'll feel like there's a big gap between them, because if WandaVision is not all dark and scary and the Multiverse of Madness is, and Scarlet Witch plays such a huge role, like will we feel like there's a disconnect there, or will it just roll smoothly?
I think it'll roll smoothly because, I mean, it just goes back to the same argument that we were just talking about, where the MCU can function as its own type of thing. Like Captain America in Captain America the Winter Soldier, that's a spy thriller movie. But then seeing him in, you know, Infinity War and Endgame, the characterization is still there. Like it's the same character, but Infinity War is not a spy thriller, you know, so it can be the same. I think, like, as long as the character feels the same, then it can kind of do whatever it wants, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. As long as it flows.
Yeah. As long as the characters can, like, flow properly and still maintain who they are as characters, I think that they'll be fine.
Yeah. I can't wait to actually just start seeing things about this, because right now we really don't know anything. We're talking a lot, but we have no idea, other than Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange are going to be like the two big characters in it. There's really no telling.
Yeah, other than just like very base, like this is the name of the movie. Here are 3 people in the movie or whatever it was, you know, it's like we have no idea. I am excited because I've been seeing a lot of theories of people saying, what if Multiverse of Madness is where they introduce Blade? And I would be totally cool with that.
Yes, same here. I'm always a fan of getting new characters into the MCU before their own movie. Like, and I know their own movie is or can be where they sort of make or break their own existence in the greater story that's going on. But the more you can plant those seeds, the better, I say. I'm a fan of that. Go ahead and introduce us to them. You know, let us start having our own theories and actually see them in costume and everything else. And they've done that. I mean, Black Panther, Spider-Man, most of the new people were sort of, you know, they dipped their big toe into a previous movie before they had their own.
Yeah, and I mean, and you just hit the nail on the head. The 2 people, like the 2 big characters that they've done that with before were Black Panther and Spider-Man, and they were both introduced in a huge, like, basically Avengers 2.5, which was Captain America Civil War, which was already stuffed to the brim with other heroes and other character arcs that they had to get through. And they still both had like really good character arcs. It introduced their characters well, and then they got their own movies, which were 2 of the most successful Marvel movies ever. So if they want to do that with Blade in just a singular like Marvel movie, like it's only Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch that are going to be popping up, and Blade can just be there to also help them out, good. Let's do it. Let's go for it.
Yep.
Plus, that means that's the sooner I get to see Blade, and I am super pumped for that, which is apparently not even coming until like phase 5, but I mean, I'm pumped for Blade.
God, yeah, I know. I hate how they even, well, I love that they threw it out there, but I hate that they came out and said it would not be phase 4.
Yeah, phase 5. But I'm just excited because I thought if we ever did get a Blade within the MCU, it was going to end up being a Marvel Netflix type show where it's like some of the smaller, darker characters get relegated to their own space in the MCU, you know?
Right.
But the fact that they're straight up like, nope, giant feature film blockbuster set within the MCU, Mahershala, 2-time Academy Award winners playing Blade, it's like, oh.
Well, that setting aside their own space and their own story might be a good little segue over into the What If show here, because this is the one out of all of the movies we've ever had and all of the shows probably even as well in the Marvel whatever greater canon. I think the What If is probably the one that like stands out as the one that doesn't belong. Like I like what they're doing, and I know that they're going to involve a bunch of the stars and the heroes and the people and the voices and everything from stuff we already know and we already love. But for me, that show is like a supporting it, like it's like a supporting show of the MCU. It shouldn't be like in the main canon, main timeline, or anything like that, I don't think. I mean, but where else are they going to put it? Like, they're not going to just be like, oh, and we're making this other show that's not in the timeline, and we're just going to throw it over here. Like, I get that you can't do that in marketing and with a new show like this, but I don't know if it belongs to be in the same timeline as the rest of these. What say you?
Yeah, whenever they first announced it, I thought that it was just going to be this fun, like, oh, and then we have like a What If show coming to Disney Plus. It'll be a cool show about like what if things, and it'll be a cool animated show about what if things were different. And I was like, oh, neat. And then whenever they announced it at San Diego Comic-Con as part of Phase 4, I was the same as you. I was like, oh, I didn't think that was going to be included in a phase. That's strange. Because I don't think it's going to end up playing anything into the main canon, you know? I think, and they announced like the through line for it, which I was like, okay, I understand how it can be in the main canon now. Basically, there's a Watcher character who has been tasked with overlooking Earth 616 or whatever it is, like the MCU Earth, and he is exploring the different options, you know, like, so this guy is technically within the MCU already, like all of the phases, watching the characters go through stuff and do stuff, but he's not like affecting their main universe or anything. He's just looking at like, oh, what if this happened? But yeah, I agree with you. It's weird that it was announced as part of Phase 4, that they were like, oh, no, yeah, Phase 4, because that's like, it just doesn't make sense to me why they would do that. It's just strange.
Yeah, unless they kind of do like old-timey cartoons that we used to watch when we were kids, where they would have like 3 different stories that you could tell all within like a 30-minute block of time they had. You know, I'm trying to recall off the top of my head. Like, I know like the Garfield show is like that. Like, you'd get the Garfield bit, but you would also get like this random other little bit about the chickens in the backyard or whatever too. So unless they really kind of break it down to where it's like, this is what the Watcher's doing this week in the MCU, and sort of what's going on and how it relates to, because he's part of that crew with like the ringleader from Ragnarok and then the Collector as well, whatever they're called, right?
I don't know, honestly. I think they're called Celestials, but I don't know for sure. I don't know if he was announced as one of them yet or not. Maybe.
I think so, or at least it's believed to be. And if that's true, then they could be like, in this 10 minutes of today's segment, then this is how he's actually interacting with, you know, the rest of the Celestials, or the present timeline, you know, today, what's happening. Right. And then this reminds him of the story of that time, or makes him curious about this over here and what would happen. And then you blast off into like the what if, you know? So I don't know. I think there's ways for them to do it. Ultimately, I think that it is exactly what you described, as it's just a show that has cool what ify things, and they just had nowhere else to throw it in, and they can't totally forsake it and throw it to the side and call it because they don't want to build it up to be something huge if it ends up not being. So they just, for lack of a better place, have placed it in phase 4. Oh, what does that sound mean?
I was wondering if you heard it. That's what it means. It's halftime.
Woohoo!
So
It's a little quiet today.
Yeah, I didn't hold it up today. I was listening to the conversation. Normally I'm pretty good about checking it and then holding it close to the microphone whenever it goes off. But today I was just listening to the conversation and didn't realize we were already there yet. But if you haven't listened to the show before, halftime is the part where Crocker and I take a break from the conversation that we're having and we talk about recent movie news, movie trailers, things we're excited about. So what do you have this week, Crocker?
Got a few things this week. One movie coming out called Honey Boy, written by Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah.
Have we talked about this yet on the podcast?
No, the trailer just dropped this week, so I don't think so.
Okay, I wanted to be sure I wasn't covering old ground here, but it looks great. Like, apparently it's getting a lot of good reviews. From what I can tell by the trailer, it's about like child stars kind of, or like child stuntmen even. I don't know. It gets a little out there. But ultimately, it's written by Shia LaBeouf, who, as we all know, was a child star. So I give him a lot of extra oomph behind that. And it just looks like it's like written and shot well. Like, it looks like one of those movies you enjoy watching. At least the trailer definitely makes it out to be.
Yeah, it's a semi-autobiographical. It's semi-based on his life.
Oh, really cool. And I was a little confused about, I think it's going to be like an Amazon Prime thing, but it is coming to theaters for a very limited run. Is kind of how I understood it. I'm not sure.
Well, Amazon Studios has been producing more and more movies recently. Like, they just made The Big Sick and Suspiria, the new Suspiria movie, and those have both had theatrical runs, except like the only thing is at the end of the theatrical runs, they come to like digital and DVD and everything like that. But when it goes to streaming, Amazon Prime has exclusive streaming rights to it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So the next one I have on my list is a movie called American Dreamer with Jim Gaffigan.
I have not heard of that one.
Okay. So Jim Gaffigan is a comic and a really good, well-known comic. And I know he has been in a few movies before, but from what I can recall, at least, this is going to be his first, like, where he is the main star of the movie, at least that I can remember. And it's not a comedy at all by the look of it. It is a very serious, like, suspense type of a movie where you're on the edge of your seat the entire time. From what I can tell based on the trailer, he's basically like a Uber driver. They call it something else, like Hell or something, Hail.
Yeah.
And he gets down on his luck, needs money, and he's basically driving around this gangbanger, drug dealer type of a guy, and realizes he has lots of money and he's doing lots of deals. So then proceeds to take his child hostage. And then it just, as you can imagine, spirals out of control from there. So totally not the Jim Gaffigan that you think of when you think of Jim Gaffigan. But that's one reason why I'm extra whole thing. And I'm not typically a fan of like just suspense movies for the sake of suspense movies. I don't know. I think it looks awesome. I'm definitely going to give it a shot.
Yeah, I like Jim Gaffigan. I think his big claim to fame right now is like being in a recurring character on That 70s Show and just like his stand-up.
Yeah, well, I feel like I've seen him in little roles. Like, he just plays like the funny, tubby, goofy guy that needs to be there for a few minutes and then he moves on.
He's like the main character, like their best friend's stepdad is Jim Gaffigan.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, last but certainly not least, the Addams Family animated trailer that came out looks freaking awesome. Like, I have a tendency to get excited more about animated films than probably a lot of people do. But I was a huge fan of the Addams Family growing up. And at least from what I can tell, it looks like they hit the nail on the head with absolutely every single character. And I can't wait to see what they do with that. At least I think it's a movie. It might be a dang show. I just saw the trailer and forgot.
No, it's a movie.
Okay.
Yeah, that one was also on my list for halftime. I also am a huge fan of the Addams Family. Loved the Addams Family movies, Addams Family Values, Addams Family Reunion. I remember they had back when it's now called Freeform, but before Freeform, it was ABC Family for a long time. But I remember before it was ABC Family, it was called Fox Family, and they had a TV show on there called The New Addams Family, and I loved that show.
Yeah. Yep. I've always been a huge fan. And even like the Munsters and everything growing up as well. Like I always loved that idea, the sort of, I don't even know what you call that, like the dark horror family, but they're just a normal family. God, surely there's a genre for that now. What do you call that?
I have no Gothic. I don't know.
Gothic. I don't know. Yeah, we'll go with that. Okay. But that's it for me. That's all my halftime.
Well, yes, Addams Family was also on my list, but that kind of is a good segue into I saw Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark this weekend. And this was a movie going into it because I remember reading these books like as a kid. Did you read these books as a kid?
No, I read Goosebumps.
That's good that you just brought up Goosebumps because I had only ever seen these books marketed towards children. I remember them being scary and stuff, but I remember it being like it was kids' books. Like it was kids' scary books. So going into this movie, I was like, oh, yeah, it's going to be like the Goosebumps movie. It's kind of like an Are You Afraid of the Dark type thing. That's what I was telling my wife, who's not a big fan of scary movies. I was like, oh, no need to worry about it. It's not going to be that scary. They made it for kids, maybe like preteens. It's not going to be a scary movie. This movie baffled everybody. This movie was terrifying.
Really?
The monsters in it were so freaking scary looking, and they like within the first 5 minutes, I think they had said shit or something like that, and I was like, huh, that's weird. And like until even maybe like 15 or 20 minutes in, until you saw like the legit like the first monster, I was like, yeah, this is like a kid's movie still. Like, okay, I can still buy it. And then like when stuff actually started to go down and like children started dying and one kid gets stabbed with a pitchfork, I was like, you know what? Maybe not.
What's it rated?
PG-13, which is, I know the Goosebumps movie is only rated PG, but I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, they made it PG-13. Maybe it's more for like the preteens. No.
So it's a straight up just a horror movie.
Yes, but a very good one. And it took a lot of it made a lot of choices that I really liked that I didn't know that it was going to make. The entirety of the movie takes place in 1968, which I had no idea walking in there. I thought it all took place in present day. It takes place in the 60s. It takes place around Halloween in a small town. So there's a lot of like really cool small town Halloween shots around fall, which is aesthetically something that I always really like because it reminds me of my childhood and like small town Halloween and stuff. And it just made a lot of really good decisions. It was a really interesting story. It took maybe 15 minutes or so to get going, but then once it was going, it went. It was good.
Was it sort of like narration style like you get with Goosebumps and Tales from the Crypt and like all of that? Or was it more like you were just actually watching a movie? Like, did it have a crypt keeper?
No, well, sort of, but the crypt keeper was part of the story. It's basically like if you were watching a Tales from the Crypt, but the people found like at the end of every Tales from the Crypt, like the crypt keeper was like writing the story, you know, and then like he'll close the book. It's basically if characters found that book that the crypt keeper was writing in, and then as they were like investigating about this book, the crypt keeper started writing stories in it that involved the people that were looking at the book. So they were like trying to unravel the mystery of the person who was writing these stories at the same time that stories were being written about them, and they had to keep dodging like all these different monsters and stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
It was really good. Very interesting. Also this week, we got some news that Disney Plus is looking into developing or redeveloping new imaginings of Home Alone, Night at the Museum, and Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which I love all three of those franchises, and I'm going to be an A1 Day One Disney Plus subscriber, so I'm there for it. Whatever they want to give me, I'm good. But I have seen a lot of like negative opinions about it, though.
I have not ever, I don't think, ever seen Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I think that Home Alone would be great to sort of reimagine because it has, at least to me, been long enough. But Night at the Museum, that seems a little too fresh because those movies like aren't that old, I don't feel like.
No, the first Night at the Museum came out in 2006. The second came out in 2009, and the third came out in 2014 or 15.
Yeah, that's a little too soon, in my opinion, to be reimagining that world that already exists and is loved by many, many people. Whereas Home Alone is like, that was like our childhood. So it makes sense that people our age are like having their own kids and want them to have their own Home Alone. Like, I get that. Like, that's the proper amount of time. And then Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I have no dog in that race.
It's funny that we're having this argument because I literally had this exact same argument with Dylan, who works with us, who's also been on the podcast before, of him saying, well, it hasn't been that long since Night at the Museum. Why do they need to reboot that one again? And I will tell you what I told him. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out in 2014. We had a new Spider-Man in the MCU in 2016. That's only 2 years, and people love this new Spider-Man. So
yeah, but that's Spider-Man. Spider-Man is...
That was his argument.
It already existed. It's loved by many. Like, it's a character that we know we will always have many, many iterations of. When you redo Night at the Museum is where you start to hear people go, oh, they just can't come up with any new good ideas. Like, because it's not like a Spider-Man. Like, if another Robin Hood comes out, like, that's okay, you know, because we know the story of Robin Hood and it's had many iterations over time. But I don't know. I don't feel like Night at the Museum has quite earned that yet.
I just don't feel like, I mean, you said it and he said it, like, Night at the Museum is loved by so many people, but I don't know anybody who has, even in the last 5 years, besides when the third one came out, been like, man, you know what was a good movie? Night at the Museum. Like, I haven't even heard it come up.
Me, I like it. I love it.
Yeah, and exactly. But you and I, who do a movie podcast together, have never talked about Night at the Museum together. And that's my point.
All right. Next week, Night at the Museum
podcast.
We will give it the credit it deserves.
Next up on my list, the Russo brothers were doing an interview, and they said that basically the interviewer was talking to them, and they were like, is there any Marvel character that you would love to do a movie for? And they were like, oh, Wolverine. And I was like, good, give it to them. Because who better to bring the XMen into the Marvel universe than the people who just like did an amazing, a seemingly impossible job of making Infinity War and Endgame, which are two of the best Marvel movies, and they seemed impossible to make. Let them have the first stab at bringing the X-Men into the Marvel universe. I am totally cool with that.
So after having the conversation that we just had about things being too fresh, I think it would be smart for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, at least for now, if they want to bring in, like we were talking about with Spider-Man and Black Panther, a mutant, like maybe one to prove that they're in the universe, and then you can build upon that existence. I think it would be smart for them to not pick Wolverine, because Wolverine is the one everybody wants to see, and he's everybody's favorite, and he was actually an Avenger, like in the comics. So I say they do, you know, what they kind of did with some of the other people they picked along the way, and choose a lesser known mutant that doesn't have a lot of feelings attached to them, bring them into the fold, but make them awesome. Like, make them the next person, the next hero people care about as much as Iron Man or Thor or Black Panther or any of those, people. Like, just make their own new character mutant, basically. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm totally cool with that too. But my whole thing was just like, yeah, if they want to do it, give it to them. Like, there's no point in us being like, oh, I don't know, maybe we should find like some new blood. Maybe we should. No, give it to the guys who just pulled off Infinity War and Endgame. They deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we were sitting in a room and they were like, I want to do this next, then nobody in that room is going to be like, "Meh, I don't know." We're just going to shower them with money.
Yeah, if they're like, do we need to bring up? We made Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. We made all those. Endgame's the highest grossing movie of all time, so I just don't know. We just don't have that good of a proven track record. Do you think?
Did Endgame officially come out on top? Did it officially cement itself at the top of the heap?
Yes, it is the highest grossing movie of all time currently.
Awesome.
Yeah. Next on my list, Christopher Landon, who you probably don't know that name, but you will know that he made the Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day 2U movies, which I'm a huge fan of, was recently in talks with Blumhouse. He's doing some kind of secret project with them that nobody really knows about. Everybody thought it was going to be Happy Death Day 3. And he was like, no, it's not Happy Death Day 3. So everybody was like, what could it be then? Some new whatever or anything like that? Well, apparently Blumhouse has been talking about existing properties for a while, and they have gotten their hands on the Scream franchise, and they kept talking about this and that, and then rumors started popping up of Christopher Landon saying like, oh yeah, I'm shooting this in Vancouver in December, whatever. And then people started releasing stuff of like, hey, look at this. There's a tax sheet filled out for Vancouver, December, and it's for Scream. So everybody's like, are they making a new Scream movie, trying to make a new Scream movie like in secret? And the guy who made Happy Death Day is making it, which is totally cool with me because Happy Death Day was an amazing horror comedy. The first one. The second one was more of like an action comedy with horror elements. But the first one is the perfect horror comedy. And Scream, while it is more horror than comedy, still has that comedy aspect to it. And I think he could be like perfect for doing that.
Yeah, and after Scary Movie, like everyone associates Scream with humor. So probably not a bad choice.
Scream's pretty funny just by itself. If you've ever like actually sat down and watched Scream, they have some like funny stuff.
Yeah, I can't tell you the last time how long it's been since I've seen that movie. But again, that's another one that I think it's been long enough now that you can remake it. And I would just say don't, like, if you're going to remake Scream, remake it the proper way, and don't do kind of what I would say they did with like the new Chucky, where they're like, hey, surprise, it's a smart house and iPhones and like all that.
Yes, I agree. I think that they could do it like using, texting elements and things like that, like that people could be being texted by the killer. But if you just go completely like the killer doesn't even talk anymore, then you lose that entire element to it, which is one of the most memorable from the original Scream movies, which is like on the phone with that voice of like, what's your favorite scary movie? And nobody knew like who it was on the other end.
You do a good impression.
I've seen it a lot. And then finally, something that you'll probably be really excited about, Cal Penn, who played Kumar in the Harold and Kumar series, was doing interview rounds for his new show coming out soon called Sunnyside. And somebody was like, hey, is Harold and Kumar 4? Have you heard anything about that? Are you guys like working on that or anything? And he was like, actually, we just sat down and talked with the guys who wrote all of the Harold and Kumar movies, and they have an idea for what a fourth movie would be that would actually be really cool. And apparently they are the guys who are now doing Cobra Kai on YouTube. In between seasons of that, they've been working on like workshopping this Harold and Kumar idea. And so after season 3 of Cobra Kai, their next project might be Harold and Kumar 4.
What? That'd be awesome.
Yeah. And I mean that John Cho, who played Harold in it, and Cal Penn are both like, yeah, we're down. Let's do it.
Yeah, of course.
So that would be awesome because I love all of the Harold and Kumar movies. They're some of I don't know why. Like the first one's just held in such high regard in my mind because it's a good movie, but also like I don't know, just the time it came out was that time when I was transitioning from elementary school to like middle school age, so I was becoming a bit more mature and like watching those type of comedies. I was like, oh, I understand all of these jokes, and like that was one of the first ones that I remember watching like a raunchy comedy and being like, oh, ho, ho.
Yeah, the first one's really the only one that I could like recite as it's playing. I probably couldn't do that to the other two.
The other two are good though too. I like them a lot as well. They each have their moments. But that's it for me for halftime. So a lot of interesting news. I saw a lot of trailers get released this week, but I didn't really go back and watch any. I don't know why. Just nothing really caught my eye besides that Addams Family one and Honey Boy.
Yep, that's pretty much same here.
All right, so everyone's favorite Avenger, Hawkeye.
Woo!
Your discouraged woo just told me everything I need to know about what you think about this series.
Hawkeye is someone I want to love. I want to love Hawkeye. I did love Hawkeye. In the first phase of the MCU, I was like, this guy he hasn't gotten any of the credit he deserves. He hasn't gotten the screen time he deserves. He hasn't gotten like anything at all, really. He was just kind of there. And I pretty much proceeded to feel that way about him, that he just continued to get the short end of the stick all the way up until it came down to him or Black Widow, and it wasn't him, and now I'm angry at him for it.
Well, I mean, he tried his absolute best.
He did.
Even when they were hanging off the cliff, he didn't make the conscious decision to let her go. She wasn't like, let me go, I'm going to sacrifice myself. And he was like, okay, I love you. He was still holding on. She kicked herself off.
I know, I get it. I know. It should have been him. But I'm excited for this show simply because it will, if I have my way, show me all of those things and give me all of the things I felt like he's been shorted on throughout the years.
Yeah, I agree. I think he never really got a chance to shine. He basically made a glorified cameo in Thor, and then he was in the Avengers, but they made a bad decision to take basically a non-established character and make him part of Loki's army throughout the majority of that movie, because then it just started him off on the wrong foot, like nobody really cared about him that much afterwards. And I think he's slowly been like making up for it. Hawkeye is somebody who I have like a personal inside joke with all of my friends and stuff, where this one of our friends, Hayden, was super excited to be dressed up as, well, basically all of us were going to see the Avengers in 2012. And he was like, oh, I want to go see it with you guys. And we're like, okay, we're dressing up. And he was like, oh, I'll be Captain America or whatever. Basically, we went through the list and we had everybody locked down except Hawkeye. And he was like, I guess I'll be Hawkeye. But then he kind of like, he jazzed himself up about it. He got super excited about it. He's like, I've been reading more Hawkeye comics. Hawkeye is super awesome. I love Hawkeye. And then in the first 5 minutes, he wasn't with the Avengers for the majority of the movie. And he was just sitting in a theater dressed as Hawkeye, like, oh. So Hawkeye's always been kind of like a joke to us, to my friends group. But throughout like Age of Ultron and Civil War, and then now Endgame, Hawkeye, I feel like he's made up a lot of ground. He's proved himself to be one of the, I would say, like, coolest guys under pressure, because he just straight up doesn't really care that much. Even when him and Black Widow were fighting, she's like, is this going to affect our friendship? And he's like, I don't know. It depends on how hard you hit me. Like, he's just a cool guy that just happens to be fighting with all of these superhero people. And so I don't know. I'm excited that he has his own show, because we really don't know that much about him. Even until Age of Ultron, we didn't know that he had a family. We still don't really know his backstory other than SHIELD agent. Like, we know Black Widow's now. She was super spy, trained a Russian spy and all this stuff, but we don't really know anything about him other than he was a SHIELD agent that's just really good with a bow and arrow, that the Avengers were like, yeah, come on, you can be on our team.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of that backstory missing. I mean, he's got a lot of like crazy stuff in the comics too that they flirted with in the last movie. God, what he become? What he become? The rogue character, Ronan. That's it. Yeah. So there's that whole story. I mean, there's a lot there with Hawkeye, and I've always had a fascination with heroes whose powers were basically like, I can always hit my mark. Like, we've talked about this with Bullseye and all that in the past. And I dig that. Like, so I'm predisposed to like loving Hawkeye, and I have just felt like he's gotten the shaft since the beginning. So that's really the main thing with this show that I have to say, is that I really hope that they start filling in a lot of those blanks, and I hope that it's awesome and we learn a lot more. And I think there's potential there for a bit of passing the torch on to his daughter as well.
Well, I don't even know if it's going to be his daughter. They announced Kate Bishop in the series that she would be popping up, and so I know that's not his daughter, but she has taken up the mantle of Hawkeye in the comics, Kate Bishop. So it might end up being like a Kate Bishop type show.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. And then finally, Love and Thunder.
And this is the one, without a doubt. I know we went through that volume thing. I'm excited for Doctor Strange, but I am pumped for Thor Love and Thunder. This is the one I am most excited about by far.
I want that t-shirt like today. Like, I would wear the t-shirt with that on it up until this movie comes out in 2021.
Yeah, as soon as they announced the title, I just went, yes. Like, I just knew immediately. I was like, yes.
Like, great album cover type art. I love it. It's so good. We don't really know a lot about this one either. We're going to have lesbian Valkyrie searching for her queen, and then Thor and then She-Thor, what do they call her? And that's about all we got. Yeah, he's
just Thor. Well, in the comics, whoever is worthy of the power that can lift the hammer takes on the power of Thor. It's not just you can lift the hammer and like do like call lightning and stuff like Captain America did. You become Thor. And so that's what happened. She lifted the hammer and then became Thor.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't know how they're going to do it in the movie, because basically they've like, anybody can pick up the hammer if they are worthy. They don't possess the power of Thor. They just can like do Thor stuff. So I don't know how she's going to become like the female Thor with the powers and stuff. I guess we'll see.
And we've already had there was a whole movie where Thor basically was learning the lesson of like, it's inside of you is what counts, you know, like the age-old tale. So with that, and with so many people having already picked up the hammer, I don't know. We'll have to see how they play that one out.
Yeah, I'm very curious. But one great thing they have on their side, Taika Waititi is back as writer and director. And God, I am hoping Korg, because he is one of my favorite characters in the entirety of the MCU. But I love Taika Waititi. I love what he did with Ragnarok. And then that was part of my excitement when they announced the Love and Thunder title. I was like, oh, it's exactly like, I didn't know what I was expecting. But when they announced it, I was like, yes, like it's exactly what I wanted. I would have taken that, or I would have gladly taken Thor Forever, but it had to be like forever, the number 4.
Thor Forever. I'm glad they went with Love and Thunder. I'm excited about it. It's probably, like I said, it's up there with Doctor Strange as being the two that I am absolutely the most pumped about. And I hope that they just keep Thor rolling. Like, I love Thor. Thor at this point could be like my favorite of, at least of the originals. I don't know. It's always hard. It's like you're saying with the music, like it ebbs and flows. But I hope they keep Thor for the long run. And for all we know, this could be a dang Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and they're just calling it Thor: Love and Thunder. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would make sense for at least the Guardians to show up in it, because the last time we saw Thor was with the Guardians. And then I don't know how that's going to end up affecting Guardians Volume 3, but that would be awesome. I think Thor fits in great with the Guardians, so I would love to see more of that.
Totally.
And I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, yeah, this is the first movie franchise within the MCU that has gone beyond 3 movies besides the Avengers. Thor is the first character to do so.
Oh yeah, that's sort of why I said, like, I hope they just keep it rolling on. Like, I hope we always continue to get more Thor movies.
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely fine with me. And that was something I said during our Infinity War thing. I was like, even if they were planning on killing Thor, they're not now after his reception in Ragnarok and Infinity War. If Thor was going to get killed in Endgame, they rewrote that. No longer. He's not gone. He's definitely still alive, and they got more to do. Thor just hit his stride in Ragnarok. I enjoyed Thor and then Thor the Dark World to a lesser extent, but Ragnarok is in my top 5, maybe even my top 3 Marvel movies of all time. Like, they hit the nail on the head with that one.
Yep, I agree. Just hit his stride.
Yeah.
Love it. And he's one of, like, the unkillable ones too. Like, I don't think they could ever really kill Thor. Like, and I'm talking like comic book style. Because Thor, I mean, you could probably kill him if you, like, stripped him of his powers or whatever, but he's been put in scenarios where, like, he becomes Odin and stuff, which I kind of hope, like, with Fat Thor, big beard, like, I hope they roll him right into being, like, super powerful Odin style. Because Odin's gone now too. And then Hulk would be the other one that would be, like, very difficult to actually justify killing.
Yeah, well, I think so many Hulk stories come from the fact that he's the only one left alive, that he's just there. Like, I mean, not really so much now anymore, because he's found the Avengers and seems to have been better off than he was. But in the Incredible Hulk and even in the first Avengers, he was definitely like, I don't want to keep living. I've tried to kill myself. I put a bullet in my mouth, and the big guy spat it out.
Right.
He definitely does not want to keep living. And so that's part of his storyline of, like, why me? Why do I get to keep going on and all these people around me don't?
Speaking of which, we need to see more of the transition into, like, perma smart Hulk, Professor Hulk.
Yeah.
We need to, like, that was one of those things where, like, when it happened, I was like, if it weren't for the fact that I'm setting in this movie and we got the rest of this movie to go, I would be mad about that. But I'm going to not say anything. You know? So now I want them to loop back around and at least give us a little something to chew on with that.
Well, I mean, I hope Hulk just starts getting his own movies again. Do you know why he doesn't have one yet?
Because of the original actor or something, probably. I don't know.
No, Universal owns the distribution rights to an Incredible Hulk movie. Paramount owned the distribution rights to all of the other Marvel movies, and then Disney took it over basically around, like, I think Captain America, the first Captain America time. So they made a deal with Paramount where they were like, no, you're not the distributors anymore. We are. But Universal Studios was the one who had Hulk, so they were under a different contract. And so now, if they wanted to make another Hulk movie, Universal would distribute it, which means they would choose, like, theaters and time available in theaters, and they would get a lot, like a pretty big cut of the box office, I'm pretty sure. And so Marvel's just like, nah, we'll just have Hulk have a character arc in Ragnarok instead. Like, they just keep pushing him in other people's movies because they don't want to pay Universal to make one on their own.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but also I love the Hulk. Give me one.
Yeah, same here.
Give me one.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of Phase 4, Part 2.
Yeah, Phase 4, Part 2, finally. But there's still much more to go with Phase 5, which they haven't even announced yet. Basically just names of things, where he, at the end of the Phase 4 announcements, was like, Blade, Black Panther 2, Captain Marvel 2, Fantastic Four, X-Men. Like, he was just saying names that are coming soon, I guess.
Guardians. Yeah, I mean,
Guardians 3.
I mean, if we get that, think about that. If Phase 5, there's no way Phase 5 is going to be the introduction of the mutants, like the introduction of Fantastic Four, like Black Panther 2, Captain Marvel 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, whatever they're on now, 3, I guess would be the number, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that, I mean, that's a hell of a phase, dude. That's a lot.
Yeah, fine with me.
Me too. But
Way
I just
better.
don't see him swinging that hard for some reason.
I don't know. Phase 4 is kind of playing it soft. I mean, we're getting some heavy hitters in there, but they're more or less just like, yeah, a couple movies, couple shows, let's do it. So
yeah, I think they're letting us all take a breather.
I think I agree with you. I think so as well. So if Phase 5, they're like, okay, breather over X-Men, Fantastic Four, like all this stuff, I'd be like, oh, okay, let's go.
Yeah, I hope. We can
I
only
hope so too. I guess we'll see.
Only hope. Okay.
But either way, I'm going to be there for it. Like we've said multiple times, I will be there to see every Marvel movie and every Marvel show that they put out.
Same here. You
well,
know that.
I guess that about wraps us up, unless you got anything else you want to say.
No, I think that's it for me.
Well, everybody, thank you for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed our MCU Phase 4 Part 2 3D breakdown. I just felt like it needed a 3D in there. Please like, comment, subscribe. What are you most excited to see in Phase 4? Let us know below. Please follow us on Instagram at Scruffy Movies.
And Crockalicious.
We thank you all for listening, and I guess we will apparently see you next week with a Night at the Museum podcast.
Bye!